I'm excited to start bringing some of this into the other future leaders. I'm going to hopefully be talking soon with Brian Williamson to talk about bringing Giant into some consulting with our leadership team. So I don't know what that's going to entail exactly, but I think the better we get to know how to lead ourselves, first and foremost, the better we can lead our teams. And I think that there's not enough of that that's done. I know, Chris, probably you and I and maybe a few others on this call have done more of it, but there's never an end point to that. We can always continue to get better and better and better and better and start to understand, who we really are and really what the best me is as far as, where do I fit the best into the most comfortable, the most, where can I thrive from a leadership standpoint. And I think understanding that can really help us lead others. So I'm excited to bring some of that. We'll be talking about it over the next, hopefully I'll have some ideas next week. I'd like to get on this sooner than later and talk about bringing some of this into the team.
Yeah, definitely. The other part of it is Giant always says the best way to lead is to know yourself to lead yourself. And part of that is, not only knowing some of your natural inclinations and things that you'll do, but also knowing how your voice, your actions, the decisions that you make can be perceived to other people. I, for example, am a very strong ENTP. And Mike, you were as well, but we were not necessarily aware. We thought we might be J's, but we are J's because we had to learn structure and rigor, and that was interesting. But some of the things around the nature of our voice can maybe rub some people the wrong way. So if you guys have read The Five Voices, for example, we're both pioneers, and the reality of the situation is that that's a very small percentage of the population, and the overly excited, expressive nature of our voice can sound harsh to one of the actual largest members of the population, guardians, for example. And that's what we're learning, is how to be better around that.
Love it. Good stuff.
Take over.
That's good. That's good. We're going to be bringing more exciting stuff on the leadership side of things, because I think that's going to really help foundationally, grow our team, grow our ability to impact other people. So I'm excited to be bringing some of that to you guys, starting over the next couple of weeks, hopefully. I am excited to launch what I had talked about last time about delving into some leadership stuff from a reading standpoint. So we're going to talk about some of that, and then we're going to do what we normally do, talk through some questions and whatnot. We're going to reserve the end of the meeting for, I would say, some of the most exciting things. But that's just so that you guys don't get bored. You'll wake up halfway through and hopefully get engaged. But I do want to make a comment. Those of you that were on the call yesterday, the mentor session yesterday, phenomenal with Brittany. I got a lot of good feedback. If you were on the call, the video is up and running. I've got some others I need to update as well. I'll hopefully be able to do that today. But guys, if you aren't plugging into the mentor sessions, number one, you should be there. Number two, if you didn't make it because of a legitimate reason, I know some of you mentioned that, I want to just show you real quickly where I'd like you to go. If you go to Agent Training and you go to this drop-down menu on the training and go to audios and videos, it'll bring up this tab. This is really, to me, once you get past all the 5 steps training, the fast track, all of that, hold on, let me log in. Once you get past all of that stuff, to me, this training is really the most, I should say, the most visited place that I would go if I was in you guys' shoes, okay? Because, yes, the fast track and the 5 steps is going to give you some key items, but as leaders, okay, it's let me gain all the high-level stuff, all the stuff that the team should be doing, where should they be plugging into. And so if you aren't aware of where this is yet, go to the audio videos, the training side of things. You really can get all of the information from the mentor sessions, the Builder's Corner, the interview example, the master agency, the Smith Master Agency stuff that gets updated, Power of a Team, all these calls. If you miss a Sunday night call, that's where you're going to get it. The SFG audios, as they update those, again, that's monitored by Symmetry as far as what ones come up in there, and we tend to update those gradually. But all of our mentor sessions, and I just want to point this out, this one right here is the one that was done yesterday, Product Education. Brittany Santos distills the best way to learn products, and literally I put in here best product practices from one of the best rock stars in the agency. So giving some props to Brittany, but definitely go check that out. If you were there yesterday, great, go watch it again. If you weren't there, go watch it for the first time. We'll also be putting the product guide was put on General yesterday. I've sent it to a few people already. Again, we're going to find the right place to put some of the documents as well, and it might be that we have another tab here that we utilize. I'm trying to figure out the best place to put that so that it's easily accessible. But do go watch this again and share it. And guys, as leaders, again, let me remind you, as leaders, when someone comes to you and says, hey, Ted, hey, Ron, hey, Farrell, Karen, Steven, I'm missing people, but hey, I need X information. Can you send it to me? Don't get into the deceived practice of just giving them the information, okay? Don't get into the practice of, sure, here it is, I'll send it to you. Because what you're reinstating, what you're reinforcing to people is that they don't have to go back to the source. They don't have to go where the information really is. They can get it from you just by asking. And so you're teaching people, if you do that, you're teaching people to be needy, and to require themselves to need you in order to get the information. And so we don't want to do that. So my encouragement to you guys as leaders would be to, from a culture standpoint, teach them, go to the source. Yes, I have that information, but I want to show you how to get it and where to go to get it, so that the next time someone else asks you, you're not coming to me, they're not coming to you, they're going to the source. Elazar, you had a question real quick.
Yeah, just for those, especially those that are on the video, if you guys don't see that when you go to the video audio training, it doesn't say Colburn Financial on the top, let one of us know, let your upline know. So we got to make sure that you're tagged correctly. One of my agents just said, I don't see any of that stuff. And sometimes you may need to log out and then log back in. But if at that point, if it still doesn't, then definitely let one of us know so we can get you tagged properly.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's totally accurate. What happens is on the website, we all get tagged as a part of the Colburn Master Agency, and you have to have that tag in order to see this information. Otherwise, you're going to see stuff that isn't even close to what we as an agency probably do. So do let one of us know so that we can get you tagged properly. Good point. Any questions about that so far? And then we'll go kind of into the question answer stuff that we usually do at the very beginning of this call. Okay, good. I'm going to keep moving on. So like we do normally in these calls, guys, this is your time, okay? This is not time for Chris or me or Santos' team or any of us to be on a pedestal distilling information to you. This is your time. So I want to do like we normally do. Those of you that are in the cold market system, those of you who are recruiting warm market, most of you on this call are doing at some capacity, doing some recruiting, or you're intending to do some recruiting. And so I want to open up the floor. There is no dumb questions unless you don't ask them. Okay, so please ask some questions. What are you struggling with? What questions do you have? What items can we be aware of? What items do you have for the leadership team that we can address? This is kind of your time from a question standpoint.
All right, well, it's Karen from Fayetteville, and I'll jump in with the first dumb question of the day. As we're recruiting and looking, we've had some discussion on there's not always A leads because the market doesn't drive that. But as an example for here locally, I mean, I think I've officially brought up all the 3A, all the 4A, and got like 2 A leads this week. what has to happen to drive some more of those? Because it makes me a little hesitant to recruit in this area when it feels like we can't even provide enough leads.
That's a great question. By the way, I'm gonna erase the whole, like, that is not a dumb question. That is a great question.
No, I had to just follow up because you said that.
So I'll just go ahead and jump in real quick, because I think this is, as recruiters, I think this is very important to understand this. There's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. Yes, there is a point at which an area can be saturated and we can't pull down enough A leads, okay? And I say A leads, mortgage protection A leads, okay? So Symmetry is doing their best to do other avenues. We have call-in leads. We have final expense leads, which very few of you are even touching. I think there's not even one of you on this call right now that's got final expense leads turned on. There is call-in, there's telephone final expense leads, okay? There is Spanish leads for those that you are bilingual, which is a huge market, okay? On top of that, you have to also have a good understanding of distilling how this process works. Just because there's no leads in your backyard doesn't mean that you shouldn't be recruiting. I'll give you a good example of Asheville, North Carolina. You know, Edward Pritchett's hometown, you know, I don't know how big Asheville is, not very large. I would guess it to be 50 to 60,000, if that.
Yeah.
And they have, how many agents? They have almost 40, is that right? 30 or 40?
Yeah, the number I think is 800,000 a month comes there. Isn't that right?
I don't know. I don't actually know the numbers. I just know that from a density standpoint.
Yeah, it's just under $1 million in revenue comes through out of that office there, basically, that hub.
Yeah, and what they have done, so what you guys have to understand is they've gotten very good at maximizing the number of A leads that come in, okay, number one. Teaching other agents to pick up the 5As, the 4As, the 3As as they go down, okay? And number two, there's a 2.5 to 3 hour radius that they come into Asheville and they go out to other locations. So there are areas like Little Rock, like Missouri, like Tulsa. I mean, there's areas across in a 3 hour radius that all of you could be going to, planning strategically, that will allow us to have, we could have 30, 40 agents in the Fayetteville office as long as people were comfortable with traveling to these other locations. I mean, you think about Memphis, Tennessee. There's no one there. There's no one. It's a huge market. Okay, yes, it's a little bit of a travel. I get that. And so as you guys are recruiting, make sure that you aren't setting the expectation that, yeah, you can come to Fayetteville and you're going to have 20 A leads a week and you're going to have a ton of people to talk to, because if that's the expectation, then you're going to let people down when reality hits, you know, rubber meets the road. But if you set the expectation to be, hey, we've got a good number of people here, we got a good local office, so anyone coming in here with a good opportunity has to be willing to travel a little bit outside of that hub. If you're willing to do that, you have a phenomenal opportunity. So it's all about the mindset of how to approach those leads.
I would add to that a lot of clarity about people that you bring in, saying very specifically, like, hey, you are going to have to travel. You're going to have to go to Little Rock. You're going to have to drive 3 hours to work a network that is wide open, but that is the reality of the situation. We'll do a lot in making sure that the person is okay with that. That's just the other thing that I would add.
Right. For me, I would add that in a lot of the call and the people that I hire on, and I let them know that, you know, most of the limitations in this business is the limitations you set on yourself. So as far as you're willing to drive is as far as what you can receive out of that area. Doesn't matter if you have 100 A leads coming in that area. You know, if you don't want to go further than the next block, you're not going to get that much either. You know, and that's where, like, I know you can just utilize the stories of other people for those examples. You know, me and Brittany, we have about a 9 to 10 hour radius if we go from one end of our GMR to the other end of our GMR. And we did actually have to cut stuff off, but now we're down to 6 hours in a radius. So, but that's still, we're driving every week 3 hours away. And so we put that expectation on ourselves. So if you already come in the door with people expecting that, then, you know, that kind of sets that up.
Totally agree. It's a good question. What other questions? And by the way, if you're muted, guys, on the phones, if you're muted, it'd be *6. Otherwise, you should have a mute button. If you're on the video conference side, you've got a mute button that you can use as well. So, Ron, do you have a question?
Mike, this is Ron. The process. If you could explain the process to everybody so everybody understands it, as far as, you know, getting a GMR and increasing the amount of flow in an area so it could be saturated at one moment and then they could increase that flow and get more out of it, or the ebbs and hubs of the tide as the market moves, you know, so everybody understands, you know, how that process behind the scenes works. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, that's good. So, and this can get pretty detailed, and I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not an expert when it comes to leads. That's the lead department, but I will tell you a little bit of the process. And it's not an exact science. So I know in my area, I've seen in the Benton County, which is what I've got turned on still personally in my name, not in the agency name. I've still got leads coming in my name here in Benton County, Arkansas, and I might have weeks where 18 come in. I've got a standing order for 10. I might have a week where 18 come in and other weeks where 4 come in. And so season by season, you know, month by month, you can see an ebb and flow. And that's because people are coming into the area. There's new homes being bought. There's new stuff being done. You know, so there are going to be ebbs and flows. Now, as far as getting a GMR turned on, you have to have 3 applications taken on bonus leads, not on yourself, okay, on bonus leads, because Symmetry wants to see that you can close a lead before they're going to create leads for you, okay? So you have to have 3 applications on bonus leads, then you can turn on a GMR. Now, just because you turn on a GMR doesn't mean you're going to get those leads immediately, okay? If it's an area that hasn't been turned on, it's going to take 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 weeks to get leads coming in, because Symmetry has to create that data. They have to send it out. They have to wait for people to respond to them, start pulling that data in, and start creating leads for you. But they are going to do their best to create enough A-leads off of what they mail in to satisfy exactly your order. They're not trying to satisfy anything more. They're not trying to satisfy anything less. So if you have an order of 12, they're going to try to do 12. They're not going to try to do 14 or 8, okay? So if they do 8 and you get 8, that's because there's either not enough or because there's someone else that has a GMR that's taken 10 and maybe there's 18 that came in and they get the 10 first because they're in priority to you and you get the remaining 8, okay? So there is a priority list. I'm not going to go into too many details on how that works. You'll understand it as you become an agency owner a little bit more. I still don't understand all of it. But it does have to do with your closing ratios. It has to do with how long you've been in an area, who has it turned on first. It has to do with your PPL. It has to do with a lot to do with your agency at large. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. So the important thing to also understand is I get a lot of people that say, hey, I've only had 4 A-leads come into my area. How come it's not being fulfilled at my 10? Well, but you're getting call-in leads, okay? Call-in leads count towards your A-lead requirement, but they don't count as an A-lead. They count as 2 call-in leads count as 1 A-lead. So if I allocate to you, if you have a list of 10 for the week and I allocate 4 A-leads, mortgage protection A-leads, and then I allocate 12 call-in leads to you, that is your fulfilled 10. Because the 12 count as 6 plus the 4 mortgage protection A-leads, okay? When you have a GMR turned on, you are obligated, even if you say, I can't afford them this week, and this is where it becomes important to work with your upline, okay? Yes, we can work with you, but understand that if you take less and those are still remaining, they go into a rollover state. So you've got 2 weeks to catch up. And what that means is, I'll give you an example. I'll pick on Chris because he's an agency owner and I can do that, okay? So let's say Chris has an order turned down at 10, and he comes to me and says, hey, Mike, listen, I can't do it this week. I can only take 5, okay? That's fine. That's cool, okay? You've already caught up. You're good. You can only take 5. That's okay. But next week, you have to take 15 because you're obligated to take 10 that come in. Now, if only 8 come in, that's a different story. But you're obligated to take 10 new ones along with the 5 from last week. Now, what happens is if people get behind, and this is where the agency owner has to be careful who they're allowing to have GMRs turned on with, because financially, you need to be buying those every week. Every week. It doesn't matter if you can or can't. You need to be picking them up every single week. Because what happens is if they go more than 2 weeks, then they roll up to the owner. And I bought leads in New Mexico, Texas, Florida, Michigan. I've bought leads that I can't work. And so I've got to look up and say, and when they roll up to the owner, they don't roll up to me at your cost. They roll up to me at my cost. So you guys are paying 27, 28, 30 a lead. I'm paying like 40 to 50 a lead. So you can imagine 10 A leads roll up to me. That's $500 that I can't even work. Okay. So it's important that you guys stay in communication with your owner. If you can't pick it up for the week, that's totally cool. Stay in communication with your owner though, and help them work through that process to properly work through it so it doesn't affect your leadership in a negative way. As far as, I will say this, there's a huge market for final expense. Guys, if you're looking for more leads and you're not getting, enough A leads in your area, or it seems like low, I think I think we've saturated about 30 to 35% of the total mortgage protection leads in the U.S. Now, some areas are more saturated than others, okay? So understand that. Final expense, I don't even think we're on the board for final expense. If you go look at the final expense lead market, like, I think there's 12 states that are lit up. I mean, there's very, very, very few states that are generating. So it might be that, hey, Mike, I'm not getting enough A leads. Can I feather in some final expense leads? Now, understand that you're going to have to learn the final expense market. You're going to have to learn how to set those. It's a different demographic. But also understand that it's often only a season that you have to learn this stuff, okay? Because I'll give you my example here. I've been in the Benton County area for over 2 years, 2.5 years. I've only actively worked it for probably 1.5 years, maybe 1.75 years, something like that. And I still have the GMR turned on, but now I've turned it over to someone else. So Karen is a good example here. I've pretty much allocated a lot of my stuff to Karen now in the area. I know I've done some to Chris, and I've done some to Nicholas Dawson. We've allocated some leads to some local agents here. I've had the GMR, but I'm not working them anymore. It's going to make another transition. At some point, Chris, I know you're not out in the field as much anymore, so I'm not allocating as many leads to you anymore. Karen, at some point, you're going to hit agency owner, and you're not going to need the leads as much anymore. So remember that saturation is a constant moving point. Constant, okay? The quicker you guys can get to a leadership position, the quicker you can get to an agency owner position, the quicker you can open up your market that you're working to some of your local agents. Does that make sense? Does that help, Ron?
Yes.
That was a different voice than what I thought Ron sounded like.
No, I was trying to answer too.
No, she's a ventriloquist. So that works. Yeah, that definitely does it. Thanks,
Good.
Karen.
Good, awesome.
You're
All right, so what other questions do we have? Let's see, we got thank you, Farrell. I appreciate that. I'm glad that helped. Any other questions that you've got regarding, any leadership items. Question again, guys, this is your time. I want to do a lot of this before we get into some of the remaining stuff.
Okay, so maybe this is not exactly leadership, so if it doesn't fall. So on these final expenses, so those would be available to people, but you said there's some training. So how, as we bring people in and they're looking at some of those, is there some suggestions? Is it just online to get set up through our regular information? Because I want to be able to turn around and train somebody on that.
Yeah, it's and that's a good question. So there's not as much training on either the Symmetry website or the agent training, but understand this: it's like dealing with call-in leads. You know how to do. You just have to tweak a few things. Okay, it's not life-altering changes. Okay, it's really isn't. And Chris, have you worked final expense? Did you work some?
Yeah, I worked some. It's literally just a sentence or two different. I mean, the reality of the situation is it's pretty much exclusively doing critical period equity protection concept conversation, and anything that you do in life is going to have compromises. The concession that you make with this is that these are probably lower tier clients that you're dealing with. Not the nicest homes, not the most intriguing conversations. I won't pretend that they are, but it's much more procedural, and I don't want to say transactional in a way that lowers the effect of the conversation. But they want to buy. They don't need you to come in there and sell them or convince them. You'll be in and out of that house in 45 minutes with an app because they know they want it. You just need to make it fit in their budget with their health issues. That's usually what it is.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is again, we can offline do a little bit of a training as well, and we might do with mentor session, we might do just some training specific to final expense, but it's a very similar script. Just remember, it's specific to final expense. So all they're looking for is 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, whatever it is, of burial. And the other thing that you'll have to be aware of is oftentimes people who do final expense, they will go in with a folder that has all the information in it. It's a burial list. It's, you help them think about what they want, their casket. It's totally different than mortgage protection in that regard. But it's one thing, we dealing with maybe 3 or 4 carriers. That's it. There is no, and most of them, they're going to qualify. It's not a question of qualifying. It's very easy. It's less premium, so you'll run into to applications that are $25 a month, $35 a month, $40 a month. You're not going to run into a lot of final expense that are $200 a month. You're not going to run into that because they're only looking for very small policies. All we want to do is be able to have a casket, bury us. That's all we want. So yes, it's a different market. Is it the most glamorous market? I think Chris already mentioned that. No, it's not. But again, I would encourage you to supplement. If you're in an area that's saturated, supplement, especially until you can get some of the other A-leads up and running and get some of the other things going. On the final expense side of things, and then we'll kind of move a different direction, we do have the ability to do phone final expense. This is something very new because one of the challenges with final expense is they make cycles from the data, the way they collect the data from a mailing standpoint. It's like once a month is all we have access.
Yeah. It's like once every 3 weeks, I think is what they said.
Yeah, it's not, we can't pull the public records like you can on a mortgage, standpoint, which is public record. So they have less. You have to wait longer, so you'll get like 25 final expense leads, and then all of a sudden you'll get 5, and then 8, and then so it'll be a big surge, and then it'll be less. So what Brian Pope has been working on is including, like the call-in lead, including a phone final expense lead, and that is something that is up and running. We just have to make sure that a person has that turned on. So just some things to be thinking about on that.
Yeah, and there are going to be, they said, 4 new lead types rolling out at the end of the first quarter, which is what we're at, and that includes the prison employee program, which you guys may not ever participate in, but there's going to be things like the internet leads, the call-in final expense leads. And the reality of the situation is, and they say it all the time, a lead is a lead is a lead. And a lot of people who come from the call center background added a lot of insight into this, where they would say we would not tell them that they're working a different lead source and their sales metrics would stay exactly the same. But then we would have them do that for 2 weeks and then tell them that they're working a new lead source, and the sales metrics would drop because they're looking for a reason why this new lead is not going to work, why it's different. And that is really important to understand. Yes, you might have to change 1 or 2 sentences, but a lead is a lead is a lead. And, you know, we came out with these call-in leads, and everyone threw their hands up and they were like, this sucks, this doesn't work. And the reality is it actually is your most profitable lead on a business efficiency scale. I don't remember the exact metrics, but Casey worked on it at the Agency Owners Academy. And yeah, it's your most profitable lead is the one that sucks the most for some reason, just because it's new.
I love that. And guys, just as a culture standpoint, you know, we try not to discriminate against people in our agency. You know, people come from different backgrounds. They have different values to add. They have different ethnicities, different genders, different backgrounds, all of that. Don't discriminate against leads, okay? Just take a very neutral stance. Stop saying, I want good leads, okay? Just stop it in your mind. They're all good, every bit of it. I mean, I know, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Bill Emo was setting meetings on 50-cent leads. And I know all of you on this call, including myself, have a tendency to go, I don't want that crap. You know, I don't want a 50-cent lead because it's junk. Listen, it's all in your mindset, okay? There's plenty of leads. It's what are you willing to do with that lead in order to help the people that need help in that lead batch. So definitely kind of check your ego, check your perception of the lead at the door, and just treat it as a person, and don't discriminate against leads. That would be my encouragement to everyone. Any other questions on recruiting, leadership, anything of that nature? All right, good. I mean, I guess we're done. We'll just be done. We did it in 40 minutes. We're done.
Cool. Yeah,
I'll ask one, Mike.
Go ahead, Ron.
When you're dealing with a large team like you're dealing with, and like Chris is dealing with now, dealing with all the different personalities and different traits, how do you bring everybody together to work together? How do you work for the different nuances of the different characteristics, the different backgrounds that people come from?
Boy, this is a good question. You know, and I don't know that I feel qualified to necessarily respond to it necessarily, but because I'm learning myself, and I know Chris, both of us, we're learning the best we can. What I can tell you is the more that you understand yourself, the more that you understand how you function, why you respond to certain things, why you react in certain ways, how you function, your stress, you know, a lot of the things that make you tick. We've got a little background noise. If you are on the call and you haven't muted yourself, go ahead and do that. The more you focus on kind of the center part of, and this sounds weird. I would have thought of this as being egocentric a while back, several years ago. But the more and more I study it and understand it, it makes more sense. So if you think of a bullseye, you know, the center part is you. And that's not in a bad ego way. That's the more stable you are, the more you understand yourself and the way you function, that influences different spheres outside. So it's going to influence your closest influence of people, which is your friends and your family, the people that you interact with most. And then it's going to go out from there all the way out to the outside sphere, being the community. So it's a different impact, but the way that you deal with yourself is going to be the first place to start. And that's the reason why I'm really excited, actually, to talk with Brian Williamson with Giant to bring some of this in, because I think there's and I'll bring in some of what we talked about this morning. There's nature and nurture. There's tendencies that we have learned because of our experiences, because of what we've been put through. You know, Brian on the call talked about how his father told him that he was stupid when he was a kid. And he just learned that trait. And so as he dealt with people, he's got a tendency, he had to learn through this, he had a tendency to think, okay, that he was dumb. I'll tell you, in my situation, I was raised in a very secluded, very conservative Christian home. There was a tendency for my parents to think that we were better than other people because of that mindset, okay? We have the truth. We know what the Bible says. Like, it was that tendency. Now, they didn't say it, but that was the place I came from. So I can see how that has moved into my life to where now, and I've hopefully grown through a lot of this, but my natural tendency is to think, oh, I'm better than that. That's my natural go-to. It feels like that's what I was trained, okay? The reality is that's not who I am, okay? So you can have learned traits that are taught to you, that are instilled in you, that you think are natural, but it's not actually who you were actually born or meant to be. Okay, that's not who your actual nature is. It's who you were nurtured into being. So, and I see that in a lot of, and it's really important to understand that, number one, in yourself, because then you have a tendency to see it better in others. And I'm not going to call anyone out, but as I've talked to people, you know, Ron, you and I have talked a lot, Chris and I have talked a lot, Elazar, Ted, and I've had more and more conversations with some of these people. As I'm learning what you guys have been through, I can understand why you guys react and treat and do certain things. It doesn't make it right or wrong, okay? And a lot of the times it's not about fixing it, it's about understanding it. Once you understand it, then you can start to going to work to see how it affects other people. And once you start to learn how it affects other people, that's where you can start to pull people together. I know Chris works well with certain groups of people. If I know as a leader what his strengths are, then I have a better understanding of partnering and working together. It's why I said this morning in the chat this morning, my tendency, okay, as a leader is to just get stuff done. Just do it. Just get it done. It doesn't make any sense to me when people can't get stuff done. That's the way I'm wired, okay? But I have a tendency to bulldoze people over when it comes to that. And I've learned that about myself. That's not a bad thing, okay? If I understand it, it's not a bad thing, used in the right appropriate manner. But as a leader, I've got to check some of that at the door and let some of the other items, let some of the other people, the other voices, okay, let some of the others speak out so that they can be heard. They can feel a part of the team. They can feel as if things are working as a unit rather than just me and myself. So, Ron, to answer your question in a very short, I mean, we don't have time to answer it all, but to answer it in a very short way, we have to, as a team, start to understand ourselves first. That's where it starts. You got to start with yourself. You got to really dig into understanding. And I'm hoping that some of the stuff that we're going to be doing with Giant will help to uncover some of that. What have you been trained to do, and what have you been meant to do? There's a difference there. And sometimes understanding that the way we react to certain things are not really what we're comfortable with. It's just been what we've been taught is the way we're supposed to do it. Sometimes that's very eye-opening, and it will help us understand ourselves, which if you don't understand yourself, you can't lead other people. It's just impossible, okay? So, and Chris, I don't know if you want to add to some of that. It's kind of a high-level response. I don't want to get into a lot of detail, but I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would add, and this is something concurrent with what you were saying and piggybacking upon it, the other thing, Ron, that I've learned is, I work very well with certain personality types and very poorly with other personality types. And where I found the most success is making what is going on in this business, in this process, not about me, but about them. Literally taking the second to pause and ask them, why are you here? What do you want out of this? What is important to you? And not necessarily assuming that you have shared common goals or the insight that you have after having been here for a year, that they share that they want to be agency owner, or that they want to make a six-figure income. They may not, but you don't necessarily know that until you take a second to just pause and ask them what is important to them. I know that for a lot of people, that is kind of a duh statement, but for me personally, that was revolutionary, to just learn to pause and calm down and earnestly care enough to ask them what is important to you. What is going to drive you day to day? What is going to make you get up and get out of bed when you had 5 appointments scheduled yesterday, you kept all of them and you sold to none of them? What is your why? That for me, I think, is the biggest thing that I can express. I'm dealing with this now. I've got some personalities that I really struggle to have a relationship with and to relate with and to understand, but it kind of doesn't matter at some point in time, the struggle that I'm having, because that's not my job. It's not about me. It's about the struggle that they're having and me trying to figure out how I, as a Sherpa, the person that is trying to get them to the mountaintop, to the greatest common good, how can I do that? So I need to talk to them and say, what is most important to you? What are you feeling? What is missing? That for me, I think that's just the other thing I would add.
Yeah, and as I was sitting here listening to you, I made a comment at the last conference when we were debriefing on Sunday, how it was very important to me that you guys, that I understand what it's like to be on the other side of me. And it's a very vulnerable spot to be in. It's a little scary to open that kind of door up, especially to people that you're not sure if they're going to beat you to death or if they're going to be kind in the way they respond. But that's understanding yourself and then understanding how you're perceived by other people is really the foundation of being a good leader. I have had to really grow in this area because, man, I've got some strong traits from a personality standpoint that I thought was good. Okay, I thought I have a tendency to think I'm always right. I have a tendency to think that I'm better than other people. I have a tendency to think that I'm highly intellectual and that no one else is as smart as me. I have these are until you verbalize this stuff and you speak it out, those are tendencies that are good if used in the right places. Okay, it's not that they're bad, but I've got to have mature perspective on those areas, and I've got to understand how that affects other people. And really, leadership, guys, leadership isn't about making other people do what they're supposed to do. That's not what leadership is, okay? Leadership, first of all, starts with being worthy to be followed. Like, you're a leader only because people follow, right? If you don't have anyone following you, you're not a leader, okay? And you can't make someone follow you. Okay, that's title leadership, and that doesn't go very far, okay? So in order to be a leader, and this is the part that really gets personal, you've got to take a real look in the mirror and say, do I have people following me because they want to follow me? Not because they have to, but because they want to follow me. And if you do, and if you have less than you think, okay, then you got to look back at yourself and say, okay, then I've got to grow myself, because people follow people that are worth following. And that's where I had to take a good look in the mirror myself. I came from Northwestern, and I looked at the people that were following me, and I thought that I was a better leader than I really was, and people left. Okay, I killed a lot of agents in the very beginning because I wasn't a good leader. I didn't understand. And I know that there's some people in this agency that I almost destroyed those relationships because I didn't have enough awareness of who I was and how I was coming across to other people. Again, my heart's always been pure, and I've always had good intentions, okay? But intentions, you've heard me say this before, intentions don't mean anything. Guys, that you can't build an agency on intentions. You got to build an agency on actions, on putting the rubber to the road, actually making things happen. And as a leader, that's the hard part, because you can't make people do things, okay? People have to do them because they want to do things. And so leadership is a reflection of yourself. And that's why it starts with yourself. It starts with growing yourself. It starts to learning your own leadership communication skills. What do you need to grow in? That's why it starts with you. And I would encourage all of you, and that's why we're going to move into this last part here. We're going to talk about reading. We already talked about it last week, but we're going to just segue. I think this has done a good segue into the first step of leadership, for me anyways, wasn't getting a business coach. It wasn't getting someone else from a therapy stand. It wasn't that, okay? That comes later on, and it's important, and we're going to get you some of that. But where it starts is identifying that you need to grow, and then identifying what books will help you grow, and just being a student of the leadership business. You gotta, the number one place I go to when I go to Barnes & Noble, I go to the leadership self-development place. That's where I live there. I breathe there. I have to have more, because I know that I don't know a lot of stuff. I don't know. You know, I've gotten to the place where I used to think I knew everything. Now I've gotten to the place where, holy crap, I don't know anything. Like, it's the total flip of the equation. And that's what happens when you have this kind of world opened up to you. It's like, man, there's so much stuff that I don't understand, and I just need to be humble and learn from other people that can pour into my understanding. So it starts with reading, and reading intentionally. And I'm gonna, Chris, do you want to say anything to that real quick, and then I'll pull up some.
No, I was gonna say that's the perfect segue.
I couldn't agree more. I'm gonna pull this up. Give me a second here.
Well, you're doing that, Mike. Can I just kind of recap, make sure I'm understanding correctly?
Definitely. Please do.
So you guys, you and Chris, basically saying that what it boils down to is know thyself, and respond versus react. Take that moment to identify who you are and what your program tendencies are. And then instead of reacting, respond in a more constructive way. Is that kind of sum everything up?
Yeah, as well as the fact that working with other personalities, you as a leader need to realize that your goal needs to be a component of helping everyone else reach their goal. Matt and Brad told me that a story about the dairy farmer who wanted his cows to produce a certain amount of milk because he needed that in order to get his orders filled. And he would sing to his cows, and he would massage his cows, and he would beat his cows, and he would do everything he could, and he could never get them to produce more milk. And someone finally said, why don't you just get more cows? That's kind of the exact same concept. It's Ron, you have to realize if you want your team to grow to this size and you have certain goals, you can only do so much if you lose sight of the fact that people are going to have their own agendas. And that's what we're getting at, is everything you said, on top of the fact that you need to really understand where your people are coming from and why, and what their personal views and values are.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add to that, and I love where you went with that, Chris. If you look at the people in your current sphere of influence, the current people that are following you currently in your agency, if you're brand new, this might not be effective, but Ron, you've got some people in your agency, Chris, you do, Santos team, Ted, Mark, Karen, all of you that have some people, if you look at them, you'll either identify them, and this is the scary part, you attract who you are. And so a lot of the problems that happen in an agency, the challenging part is that you as a person have attracted that person. They have seen something in you that they resonate with, okay? And that could be good or bad, okay? And I've had to put out plenty of fires in my agencies as a reflection of that was something bad in me that I reflected out to them. I attracted that individual to this business, and now I've got to deal with and reap those consequences. So as you look at the people that are following you, it's a reflection of, not entirely, okay? I'm not saying that everyone's a replica of you, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But there are character traits that they resonate with you, which is why they have partnered with you and decided to grow with you, okay? So if you're dealing with a lot of fires, if you're dealing with people that won't follow through, okay, this is a good indicator that you're probably not doing that because they see it in you. And you lead by example. That's just the way it is, okay? So that's the harsh reality sometimes of leadership is tough because it says a lot about us. It says a lot about who we are, and it talks a lot about our inadequacies as leaders. It reflects that. It teaches us where we got to grow, and that can be scary, okay? But a mature leader says, great, now I know what I need to work on. Great, perfect. I'm so glad that you're a part of this agency because you're helping me learn areas that I need to grow in. That's what a mature leader will reinforce other people and lead up, okay, not call out. We're not in the business of calling people out. We're in the business of leading people up. And that's what we need to focus on. So, and we're going to do more and more of this. Again, I'm not the person to be the expert in the room to talk about this. That's why we're going to bring in Giant. We're going to be bringing in other people. Again, I'd rather have other people pour into you guys and me get to learn in the process as well. I am going to share on the screen real quick. Those of you that are on the phone side, I'll share this with the Builders Call in a second. But we've put together a book list. And again, this is going to be a moving target, okay? We ideally, if we got everything as leaders, if Chris, I know the Santos team, the Clark, agency, Chris, Elazar, Brittany, myself, we've kind of helped to put this together. We've looked at what we felt like were good books to read. And ideally we'd say, hey, you guys would knock these out in 12 months. You'd be able to read all these. Guys, that looks like a daunting task even for me, okay? And I enjoy reading. The goal isn't to get through all these, okay? The goal is to have a list that you can pick from that you would identify with that particular area in your leadership. Now, we are going to encourage on a monthly basis that we're going to all focus on one particular book that we feel will be impactful. And for us, that initial first book is going to be the first one in this personal development, okay? So we're going to focus on personal development first. Then we might focus on some leadership stuff, okay? Some happiness. Some of you guys need to do some reading on some happiness, gratitude stuff, okay? You guys know more about what you need than I do, okay? So pick from this book list and pick a couple of books that you want to read and set a goal and read them, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to start reading as a team. We're going to start reading The One Thing, okay? I've already read it several times. I'm going to read through it again. And then every week, we're going to, as a leadership group, okay, and we're going to start here. This is what Chris and I and Elazar were talking about right at the very beginning of the call. Where is the best place to put this as a group? Now, I understand that the whole agency needs to be reading, okay? I get that. But I agree with the leadership is what needs to disseminate that down to the team. So your job is to one of two things. First of all, read, participate. I'm going to be calling on some people that you raised your hands last time. I would like to teach, okay? And so I'm going to be calling on some of you to teach, 15, 20 minutes every week, distilling the most important stuff down on what you learned from those chapters that we're going to chunk this out into quarters, okay? So over a week, we'll read a quarter of the book, then we'll read another quarter of the book, then another quarter of the book. And those of you that don't read quickly, buy the Audible book, okay? Again, don't let it be an excuse to not get it done. We don't appreciate excuse givers. We appreciate people that do what they need to be doing, okay? So I would say, and I haven't even picked the first person that wants to do this on the first week basis, but we will next week, okay, be talking about the first quarter of The One Thing, okay? And if you don't have the book, buy it now on Amazon. It's Friday. You'll probably get it by Monday, okay? And you'll have plenty of time. Chris, I know you want to say something.
I was just going to say that this is one of the books that actually really is just as good in the audio version as it is in the actual book version. Not all books come across as well in audiobook. You don't necessarily have the opportunity to get as much out of that, but this is one of the ones that is just as good. If someone needs an actual link to the Audible version of it, just Slack me and I'll send you the direct link to it, because I have it in my library. It's a good audiobook as well.
Perfect. So just again, for clarity, this all starts with ourselves. Okay, we're talking about leadership. Starts with ourselves. It starts with being passionate about uncovering areas in our own lives that we need to grow in. How can I be a better leader? How can I understand myself? Okay, and it starts with reading books, instilling information into you from a very strategic standpoint. Now, I know we're focusing on the one thing, okay, for our first book. That doesn't mean that you only need to focus on one book, okay? If you read through this and you say, hey, I want to learn more about business strategy, and I feel intrigued to read the Peak book by Chip Conley. Okay, do it. That's fine. That's great. I want you guys to be pouring into yourselves so that a lot of this terminology and a lot of the leadership ideas and skills and ideas, you're going to learn that they're all kind of the same, but they're distilled in different ways so that people can understand them better, depending on their personality traits. So it will help you as we go through some of the training with Giant. It's going to help you understand why they're doing certain things. The more you're read, the more you understand leadership as a whole, personal development as a whole, the more you'll be aware of why a lot of this stuff makes sense and why it's important. So I know we've got a couple of comments here. I just wanted to see those real quick. Yes, Ron, I am going to put this in Slack. I'll put this in the builders section. So if you are not in the builders section, message me and we'll put you in. Okay, that's totally fine. You don't have to be in the cold market side to be in the builder section. If you're on this call, you want to be in the builder section, message your upline, we'll put you in that channel. That's totally fine. And then we'll post this list in the builders channel. And I will also post the chapters that we'll be going through. We're going to break down the book by quarter by quarter by quarter so that we have 4 weeks in order to get through this first book. I do recognize those of you that this drives you a little nuts. I know that we're not at the very beginning of the month. And so, yes, for some of you that do want to follow through on a begin at the beginning of the month and end at the end of the month, that might frustrate you. Just work with us. Know that that's an area that maybe you need to grow in, and be okay with that. So we're going to do for the next 4 weeks, we're going to get through the one thing, and we're going to have some very good conversations around how to implement those things. And guys, the second part of what I said, it's your job to distill this information to your team. That's the second part of it. You read it, now go teach it to your team. That's what I want to see happening here as a leadership group, working together, talking about it, implementing, and then going to your sphere of influence and teaching them these skills that you're learning to encourage your sphere of influence to be reading. And if you feel like someone needs to be in the builders call, in the builders group, invite them in, okay? Invite them into the group so that they can participate. Just recognize that this is leadership, okay? So we are focused, actively focused on growing leaders inside of this group. Chris, did you have something else that you wanted to say? No, okay. All right. So guys, I don't have anything else. That's what I wanted to cover today. I will put this in Slack. Is there any other quick questions? Okay, I guess there isn't any other quick questions. So we'll be done with today. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being on the call. We will see you next week. Have a phenomenal weekend. And please don't forget to educate your people to upload their apps today. I know that this is the last day for the week. We want to have a phenomenal week. We're pushing for 300 for the month, and it starts with finishing this week strong. So don't quit today until you've got your whole team submitting apps and done for the day. So appreciate each one of you. Lead from the front, and so proud to be working with each one of you guys.
Thank you all.